I'm Nicole, 32 years old, living in Santa Rosa, a small town in Northern California, where everyone seems to know each other, but no one really knows anything at all. That afternoon, under the blazing sun, I had just finished my shift at the lab when I received a text from my dad. Family dinner tonight, 6 p.m., be on time. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. My mom usually made rosemary roasted chicken, and my younger sister, Trina, would set the table with fresh flowers from the backyard. But this time, the house was eerily quiet. I opened the door and realized it immediately. No scent of food, no music playing, no warm kitchen light like always. Just three people already seated in the living room, as if they had just finished rehearsing something in secret. My father, Gerald, a retired high school teacher, sat upright, expression stiff. My mother, Lorraine, had her hands folded tightly, as if trying to hold something from falling apart. Marcus, my older brother, lounged back in the armchair with a smug half-smile. Trina glanced at me, eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. I forced a smile. "What's with all the serious faces?" No one answered. My dad simply said, "Sit down." I took the seat directly across from them, spine straight like I was awaiting judgment in a courtroom. Marcus spoke first, no build-up. "You withdrew over $3,000 from Mom and Dad's retirement account. You think no one would notice?" I froze. "What?" He tossed a printed bank statement on the table, a red circle around a highlighted withdrawal. "The bank confirmed it's under your name." I picked up the paper, heart pounding. I had never touched that account. No password, no access. "That's not me. Maybe someone used my info." "Don't play dumb," Trina cut in, voice laced with disgust. "Oh, and by the way, are you still seeing Dr. Harlan? You know, the married guy with 3 kids? I shot to my feet. "What are you talking about?" He told me everything," Trina sneered. "You seduced him, and you tried to sleep with my fiancé last year. He told me that too." My chest tightened like it was caught in a vice. "You're both making this up." My mother still wouldn't look at me. She just whispered, "You've changed. We don't recognize who you are anymore." I clenched my fists. "Why didn't you ask me anything? Why do you just believe them?" My dad cut in, voice like steel. "We've made our decision. You're removed from the family trust, and you need to leave tonight." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The room blurred, the family photos on the wall, the piano I used to practice on in 3rd grade. Everything slipped away like sand in water. "You've got 1 hour," Marcus said. "Your bag's already packed. It's in the hallway." I turned my head toward the door. An old fabric duffel bag, definitely mine, sat neatly on the tile floor. I walked out. No one stopped me. My mother didn't get up. My father sat still, as if a weight had just been lifted. In the garage, I saw Gerald standing next to the trash bin. He had just tossed something in. I glanced inside. It was our family photo album. "Seriously?" I asked, throat tightening. He shrugged. "Figured you wouldn't need it where you're going." I didn't cry. My legs moved toward the car, driven by something closer to instinct than choice. No home, no money, no family. But I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. I drove aimlessly, the wind slamming against the window like it was trying to shake me awake from the nightmare I had just lived. The feeling of being torn away from everything that once felt like home still burned hot in my chest. I pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of Petaluma and rented a small room at an old motel across the street. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach and faded sweat, but at least the door had a working lock. I sat down on the cold tile floor next to the bed, phone in hand. Still no messages from my parents. Not a word. The dark screen reflected my own face, pale, unfamiliar. I opened my wallet and pulled out the receipt for a pregnancy test I'd bought 4 days ago. I'd kept it, even though I hadn't had the courage to use it yet. Back then, my body just felt different, like it was carrying a weight of its own. My mind was a mess between work, research, and the slow-burning fractures inside my family. I kept brushing the thought aside. I'd planned to wait, but now there was nothing left to wait for. I got up, grabbed the test, and walked into the cramped bathroom. The dim fluorescent light cast a harsh glow on my tense face in the mirror. 10 minutes later, 2 red lines appeared. Clear, undeniable. I set the test down on the edge of the sink, both hands gripping the counter for balance. My mind was blank. I didn't cry, I just whispered one thing, like I was trying to steady myself. At least, I'm not completely alone. A wave of lightheadedness passed through me. I sat down on the toilet lid, holding my stomach. It wasn't pain, just a strange pressure, like my body had just opened a door to a completely different chapter. I reached for my phone. I didn't know what I was doing, but my fingers had already typed out a message. We need to talk. The recipient was Elliot Foster, the only person I hadn't deleted from my contacts. 3 hours later, he knocked on my door. He stood there in an old brown leather jacket, a slouched beanie, and eyes filled with suspicion. But softness, too. Elliot was never the kind of man my parents approved of. He came from a farming family in Oregon, had worked in wildlife preservation, and cared more about biology than money. They used to call him that cloud-headed guy with a science crush. I opened the door without saying anything. He stepped in, scanning the small room like he was mapping invisible bruises. "What did they do to you?" he asked, voice low and rough. I handed him the pregnancy test. He looked at it and didn't react the way I thought he would. No shock, no panic. He just sat down on the edge of the bed, hands clasped. "How far along?" "I think around 6 weeks, but Elliot, there's something else." I swallowed. "I just got kicked out of the house." His eyes sharpened. "Because of the pregnancy?" "No, they don't know. They believed what Marcus and Trina said, that I stole money, slept with married men, destroyed someone's engagement." He didn't say anything, but I saw his right hand clench into a fist. I'm not looking for pity. I just thought, you should know. He let out a long breath, then looked at me for a while. "Nicole, I never believed them. I know who you are. I saw Marcus interrupt your presentation at the Berkeley conference. I saw that slide. Your name was erased, and you stayed silent." I froze. "You noticed that? I'm not blind, and I didn't walk away. I just thought you'd need time." I sat beside Elliot, my back against the cold wall. Everything was quiet for a while. "What are you going to do?" he asked, eyes steady. "I don't know. I have no home, no steady job, and it's not just one baby. I had my first ultrasound last week at the campus clinic. It's twins." Elliot looked up, eyes wide. Then suddenly, he let out a soft laugh, not mocking, but like a light breaking through heavy clouds. "You know," he said, "the only thing scarier than having kids is walking away from someone you love when she needs you most." I turned to him. "You're saying?" "I'm staying. You're not alone." I rested my head on his shoulder. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled, a long, deep breath that didn't carry fear with it anymore. I woke up around 6 a.m. in that tiny motel room where the light barely reached the mirror. The pillow still held the imprint from the night before, where Elliot had sat, watching me sleep, his hand resting on my belly like he was protecting something sacred. He had left at dawn for a short work trip to Monterey, but on the table, he left a cup of coffee and a small note. "I believe in you, in everything you've done, and everything you're about to do." I kept that note in my wallet, next to an old photo. Me and Grandma, standing in front of the wooden house in Mill Valley. The one Trina once said was too embarrassing to hang anywhere. I sat at the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and instinctively started scrolling through the old research files on my hard drive. What was left of my dissertation project, my study on oxidative stress gene expression in human cells, the one I'd lost sleep over for 3 years, the same one Marcus had stolen. It all started at the California State Molecular Biology Conference 2 years ago. I never liked speaking on stage, so I agreed to let Marcus, the media face of the family, present. We'd made it clear. I wrote most of the content, he'd read the script. I sat in the audience, palms sweaty. When he stepped on stage, I still had hope. But then the first slide came up. My name had been replaced with Marcus Callahan, lead researcher. Second slide. Third. No mention of me. No footnotes. No acknowledgements. I turned to my dad. He sat next to me. I was about to ask why, but he just nodded in approval. Marcus is finally stepping up. You could learn a thing or two from your brother. I sat there frozen. Didn't speak. Didn't push back. Marcus got a research deal right after the event. A professor from a university in San Diego sent him an offer. I knew he didn't understand a word of the data I had analyzed, but that didn't matter. He was the son, the hope of the Callahan family. And me. Despite completing over 80% of the project, I was excluded from the author list of the academic paper. No call, no permission. My name never existed in any official record. My mom once told me, "Women who go too deep into science tend to lose their way, Nicole. Better to get married and have kids." I almost quit the field, but Grandma was the only one who held me back. In my sophomore year, she gave me a turquoise necklace she used to wear, chipped but glowing with a quiet meaning. My mother gave this to me when I got my first scholarship. Now it's your turn. I cherished it like treasure. But a week after she passed, it disappeared. I asked Trina. She shrugged. "There's something else? I don't know. Maybe Grandma gave it to me. I was the only one who arranged the flowers for the funeral." 3 months later, at Trina's birthday party at a hotel in Napa Valley, I saw her wearing the necklace, adjusting the chain to match her emerald dress, joking with friends. "This is a family heirloom. Grandma left it to the one who deserved it most." I stood silently at the doorway. I knew that if I spoke, people would say I was jealous, or worse, that I was making it up. That was when I realized I never had a fair chance in this family. Every step I took was dismissed, blocked, or stolen. I closed the laptop, chest heavy. I'd stayed silent too long, let too much slide, and let others rewrite the story of my life in their words. Twisted, distorted, denied. Not anymore. I reopened the original research folder, where I'd stored every draft, every time-stamped note, every scribbled annotation in my own handwriting. I stared at the screen. If they erased my name from everything, then I'll start over, with mine at the top. The only question left, where do I begin? And I already had a name in mind, not Marcus, not Trina. A person who once told me, "You don't need their approval, you just need to build something they can't deny." Elliot Foster. I picked up my phone and opened a message. "Do you remember that idea from last year about an independent research platform for women? I think it's time." I didn't have to wait long. His reply appeared. "I'm on my way back. You've got the vision, I've got the tools, let's build." I looked out the window. Clouds were gathering over the California sky. But this time I didn't feel afraid. I moved out of the motel on a February morning when the fog still clung to the tree canopies along Highway 12. Elliot had helped me find a small studio apartment on the south side of Santa Rosa, worn out with peeling paint on the walls, but quiet and big enough for a desk, an armchair, and 2 foldable beds for the near future. We bought a second-hand mini fridge, an electric kettle, and borrowed a microwave from the upstairs neighbor. I placed the printer on an empty cardboard box, propped up my laptop with a few old textbooks my dad used to call idealistic and impractical. I was officially starting over. My original idea was a prototype model of enzyme reactions to free radicals in the blood, aiming to detect early signs of cellular disorders in women, especially young women and pregnant individuals, a group often overlooked in clinical trials. This had once been the core of the dissertation Marcus presented, turning it into a flashy pitch for investors using his last name. But I still had the first draft, messy formulas scribbled in my 4th-year notebook with faded blue ink dates. I wasn't trying to reclaim the past. I was going to build something new, from scratch, with my name on it. One night, Elliot brought back boxed spaghetti and 2 strawberry ice cream cups. I looked at him and asked, "What do you think of the name Leora Labs?" Elliot thought for a second. Leora, doesn't that mean light? I nodded. I once thought of naming a daughter that if I ever had one, but maybe now it can be the name of a company first. We both laughed, and I opened Google domains. leoralabs.com, still unclaimed. 2 hours later, I received a confirmation email for the domain name. The LLC registration was in process, and I'd drafted a temporary logo using a free design tool. 3 days later, I filed for a biotech operating license in Sonoma County. No funding, no lab, no reputation, but I had data and a deep belief that the current system had failed far too many women like me, smart women, silenced women, and pregnant women, left behind when the world turned its back. I spent most of my time at the Rohnert Park Public Library, where there was free Wi-Fi and an outlet under every long wooden table. I retaught myself grant writing models, market analysis, how to approach angel investors, and read every line of FDA public reports related to molecular biology from the last 10 years. Late in the afternoon, I would stop by Elliot's place and borrow the office printer where he was temping to print the first 20 pitch deck copies. He didn't ask much, just left pencil notes on the printed sheets. Focus on cost-cutting metrics. No one cares about feelings if the numbers aren't sharp enough. I knew what he meant. I didn't need sympathy. I needed someone to believe in the product. A week later, I submitted an application to a women's startup program in San Francisco, a 3-month accelerator with a $20,000 prize for the winner. I didn't expect to win. I just needed a chance to be heard. The interview took place in a building with glass walls stretching to the ceiling, the kind of place where people can tell if you belong just by your outfit. I wore a fitted dress that gently outlined my belly with a light gray blazer Elliot once lent me from his cousin. When I walked into the room, I caught a flicker of pity in the judge's eyes. Maybe they saw the curve of my stomach, not obvious yet, but no longer hidden. I started with the first slide. Currently, the cost of biological testing for pregnant women in the U.S. is 3 times higher than the average insurance coverage. Leora Labs offers a solution that cuts costs by 52% using rapid enzyme simulation technology, no large lab equipment required, no mention of my situation, no family backstory, no complaints. Just data and belief. When I finished, no one clapped, but one of the 3 judges, a woman in her 50s with silver hair tied high, looked at me and asked, "Have you ever had anyone backing this project?" I smiled. "Just me, and 2 children who haven't been born yet." A long pause followed. Then she wrote something in her notebook. That night, I received an email confirmation. "Congratulations, Nicola Callahan. You've been selected as one of 10 founders for the program." I cried, but not loudly. Just a deep exhale, like something heavy had finally been lifted from my chest. Week 3 of the San Francisco Startup Program began with an event called Investor Speed Pitch. Each founder had exactly 5 minutes to present to 3 different investors. The meeting room was divided into several tables, each one a small battleground of patience, expectation, or bias. The air was thick with caffeine, expensive cologne, and the rapid clatter of keyboard keys. I wore a simple black dress, tied my hair back neatly, and used a soft belt to conceal the bump that was now showing. Stepping into the room with over 30 other founders, I reminded myself, don't let the bump speak, let the numbers do that. At the first table, I met a woman named Lena, around 40, bright eyes, short platinum hair. She listened intently, asked detailed questions about the enzyme extraction process and potential applications in community clinics. I felt heard and left the table with a sense of ease. At the second table sat a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and gold-rimmed glasses. 3 minutes into my pitch, he interrupted. "If this technology is as effective as you say, why would someone like you have no backing from a university or formal lab?" I replied evenly, "Because I once let someone else take credit for my work. Now I'm rebuilding it from the ground up, with my own name on it." He paused, then nodded without another word. Then came the final table, a tall man with light brown hair wearing a canali blazer, name tag, Charles Hinton. His right hand was on his phone, only looking up when I began my first slide. I presented as practiced. Steady, confident, enzyme activation rates, target patient demographics, scalability, all illustrated with clean graphs. When I got to the MVP, minimum viable product, segment, he smirked. How old are you? Question completely irrelevant to investing. I replied briefly, 32. And you're pregnant, aren't you? I looked him straight in the eye. Yes, with twins. A single woman, no major investors, no lab, pregnant with twins. And you think you can run a biotech company? His voice was soft as air, but sharp enough to cut through the confidence I'd layered on that morning. No one interrupted him. Around us, people kept typing, pouring coffee, as if this kind of bias was just background noise, too common to challenge. I tightened my fingers, but didn't change expression. I don't think, Mr. Hinton. I know. And I'm not alone. He tilted his head. Not alone? You mean you have a team? I mean, there are millions of pregnant women under research with no early biological monitoring. I'm doing this for them. And I carry their voices with me. Charles leaned back in his chair, smirking. Good luck, Ms. Callahan, but investing isn't charity. I nodded politely and walked away from the table without looking back. In the hallway behind the pitch room, I leaned against the wall. My fingers trembled with anger. I wasn't surprised, but I was furious. Not because he was wrong, but because he believed his view was default, something everyone silently accepted. I was heading toward the restroom when someone gently tugged on my sleeve. It was Lena, the investor from the first table. I heard everything he said. Her voice was soft but firm. You handled it well. Really well. I gave a faint smile, but before I could respond, she handed me a business card. And this is my direct email. When you're ready to present a detailed financial plan, send it to me. I'm not promising funding just yet, but I want to hear your story fully, without interruptions. I took the card and nodded. That afternoon, back in the apartment, I placed Lena's card beside my water glass and opened my laptop. I didn't open the old pitch deck, I opened a blank document. The first line I typed was, I don't need to prove I can, I need to prove they were wrong to think I couldn't. The California Coastal Health Conference took place in early April at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, a lavish venue with crystal ceilings, red carpets lining every hallway, and sound equipment so expensive that even footsteps on stage echoed like declarations. I hadn't expected an invitation, but 3 days before the event, the organizers reached out to say a speaking slot had just opened up after a last-minute cancellation. I submitted my presentation within 2 hours, barely revising it. Everything had been ready inside me for months. By the time I arrived, my belly had grown noticeably heavier. I wore a knee-length navy dress with a long gray blazer to soften the outline, not to hide, but so people would listen. Before they judged. No standee, no funding, no glittering logo on the projection screen, but when I walked into the main lobby, I froze. Amid the gold and glass, a nearly 10-foot-tall banner stood just left of the entrance, featuring Trina, my sister. She wore a white lab coat like a doctor, her head tilted, eyes gazing downward with a faux contemplative look. Below it, bold text read, Imperia Foundation, leading the women's health revolution. I held my breath. At the bottom of the banner was a quote, in elegant serif font. Every cell carries a new opportunity. We just have to listen. I recognized it immediately. It was a line I had written in my research journal during my 3rd year of grad school. I had used it to open the very first proposal for Lior Labs. No one else had ever seen that quote, except Trina, who once borrowed my laptop to print an essay. Didn't need more evidence. I knew exactly what was coming. Inside the main conference room, the moderator had just announced the speaker list. Trina was listed last. Keynote speaker for the session titled Biotech and Gender Equity. I was scheduled right before her. As I stepped onto the stage, I could feel the curious glances. The woman with no backing, no reputation, just a short bio mentioning a researcher developing enzyme testing for underserved women. I didn't begin with a greeting. I opened with the first slide, a cost comparison chart between traditional testing models and the technology I had built. Then came data from 3 community clinics I had partnered with over the past 6 months. The room fell silent. After the 4th slide, I turned off the projector and faced the audience. I know I don't have what makes a talk memorable. No foundation named after me, no glossy photos with celebrities, no carefully curated backstory. I have only one thing, the truth. I paused. A few people shifted in their seats, now paying full attention. I once lived in a family where my voice was considered a nuisance, where my achievements were signed under someone else's name, where I was called a troublemaker just because I didn't fit the mold. And I'm not saying this for sympathy. I turned to the final slide, a blurry side photo of me working under neon lab lights. I'm saying this because if you're here today and feeling inspired by Impera Foundation's talk about cells that speak, or female enzyme language, then you should know that story didn't start with their founder. It started with a girl who got kicked out of her home for refusing to stay silent. I looked straight toward the crowd, where Trina had just entered, holding her printed speech. Her eyes met mine. She froze. I don't have a sister. No one represents me. No one has the right to tell my story under my name. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was weight, so heavy that the moderator rushed onto the stage to move the program along. Trina didn't come up. She turned and walked out so fast her pleated dress barely had time to sway. As I stepped down, an older woman, seated in the front row, stood, walked over, and gently took my hand. You just did what so many women in this room wish we'd had the courage to do 10 years ago. I didn't know what to say. I simply smiled. And when I looked at the screen behind me, still flashing the words Imperium Foundation, I knew in that moment I had reclaimed what they thought they had stolen forever. My name. 2 days after the conference, a plain white envelope with no postmark appeared on my doorstep. The courier had slipped it under the doormat like a utility bill, but I knew whatever was inside carried far more weight. I opened it. My eyes scanned the bolded title. Legal notice, defamation against individual and organization. Sender, Impera Foundation, represented by Trina Callahan. Trina, my sister, had said nothing at the conference, made no public rebuttal, but now chose to respond through a lawyer. She accused me of fabricating information to damage personal reputation and undermine brand assets. Attached was a demand: remove all video recordings of my speech, issue a public apology, or they would pursue civil litigation under applicable California statutes. I folded the paper and placed it on the table. No trembling hands, no racing heart, just a wry smile. Elliot, who was wiping the stove, looked up. They sent it? I nodded. I did, and she doesn't know I've been ready for months. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder labeled case_NC1. Inside were all the materials I'd collected since the day I first realized my work had been stolen. A handwritten draft from 2019, photographed with an old Nokia phone, with original timestamp. The first Word document with metadata showing Nicole C. as the creator, dated earlier than any of Trina's submitted files. An audio recording from the night she borrowed my laptop to print a presentation, in which she called her best friend and laughed. My sister has no idea I just copied the whole file. Honestly, she doesn't even know how to phrase things to hook investors. A lab notebook stained from when I spilled coffee, showing enzyme schematics she later used to design the Impera logo. An old message from a Stanford researcher thanking me for a breakthrough idea forwarded to me from Trina's email address. I brought everything to the law office of Renee Marshall, the attorney who once won a case against a major pharmaceutical company for stealing a female engineer's patent. She reviewed the documents without blinking. Do you want to counter or go all in? All in, but by the book. I don't want destruction, I want clarity. And what's rightfully mine? She nodded. Then buckle up. They think this is just a scare tactic. We'll show them that legal warfare isn't as easy as building a fake brand. 1 month later, I received a court summons from the Sonoma County District Court. Plaintiff Trina Callahan and Impera Foundation. Defendant with a counterclaim. Nicole Callahan filing for intellectual property theft, unauthorized use of research data, and plagiarism in published materials. On the day of the hearing, I arrived early. So did Trina. She wore a cream-colored suit, her hair in a high bun, clutching a designer handbag. She walked like she was heading to receive an award, not to face a counter lawsuit. But the moment her eyes met mine, her confidence faltered. Renee leaned toward me and whispered, "I'll open." In her opening statement, Renee was direct, unadorned. This isn't a family drama. This is a heist, deliberate, calculated, with the goal of converting intellectual assets into personal profit. Trina's lawyer fired back that scientific ideas often overlap and claimed the Impera Foundation was built on unrelated personal inspiration. I stood up. Permission to speak? I handed the judge a USB containing audio recordings, verified time-stamped files authenticated by 3 independent systems, and a statement from an academic advisor who had directly overseen my work back then. Finally, I looked straight at Trina. You can take the name, the fund, the tagline, but you can't replicate what you've never lived through. The sleepless nights in a freezing lab, calculating enzyme values line by line, unit by unit. That was work. That was blood. That was mine. The courtroom fell silent. The judge, a silver-haired woman with eyes sharp as a scalpel, tapped her gavel gently. After reviewing the evidence, this court declares Nicole Callahan is the lawful owner of the research work. All associated materials used by the Impera Foundation show signs of copyright infringement. I hereby issue a temporary injunction halting any use, distribution, or promotion of the disputed content. Trina remained seated. She said nothing. No one got up to walk her out. I left not in triumph, but in relief. The manuscript, the name, the story had finally returned to where they belonged. And for the first time in years, I felt truly heard. That summer, Sonoma was drier than usual. But in the small plot behind our rented house in Healdsburg, Elliot built a humble greenhouse from reclaimed wood and old acrylic panels. Inside, he grew medicinal herbs essential for a new biotech experiment I was developing, an extract designed to inhibit early-stage ovarian cancer cells. I returned to work at Santa Rosa Tech Lab, where I once interned as a student. They offered me a lab corner, rent-free for the first 3 months, in exchange for sharing my data with their community team. I accepted without hesitation. Biora Labs, my startup, continued operating as a semi-independent testing platform. We had no major investors yet, but a small nonprofit from San Diego offered a seed fund of $45,000 with just one condition: focus on women forgotten by the healthcare system. So I began with those who once mirrored my own pain. Uninsured, single pregnant women, especially minorities, in Northern California's rural towns. We built a mobile testing kit, enzyme-based, fast-reacting, and small enough to fit in a box barely bigger than a pizza. In collaboration with mobile clinics, we reached over 300 patients in just the first 2 months. I didn't speak much, no press, no panels, no op-eds, but the numbers spoke for me. An 87% detection rate for abnormal cells, at 58% lower cost than traditional models. And then the babies came. Lucas and Alara, born on a rainy September night. Elliot held my hand the entire labor, sweat dripping from his brow, while I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, I made it here, and I'm not walking alone anymore. We didn't throw a big celebration, just 3 close friends, a homemade cake, and a handwritten card from our former landlady. To Nicole, the woman who never stayed silent, and her 2 little angels, wishing you a life that needs no one's permission. I stood still reading it, because she was right. I no longer needed permission. A month later, I received an email from a cancer research institute in Oregon. They wanted to collaborate on adapting Leora's tech for a major early-stage screening project targeting women under 40. I flew to Portland with Elliot and the twins. It was the first trip in my life where I didn't have to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. During the meeting, after I'd presented the entire technical pipeline, an older scientist with silver hair and a warm voice asked me, "Did you ever think you'd come this far?" I looked at my twins asleep in their stroller, then turned back and said, "No, but I know I'm not stopping. Because every step I take now no longer requires looking back." My old family remains silent. No apology, no message since the trial, but I no longer expect any. They're free to live their version of the story. And me, I'm living mine. One winter morning, I stood before the whiteboard in Leora Labs and wrote the title of my next research proposal: Development of Targeted Therapeutic Peptides for Early-Stage Ovarian Cancer. Under it, I added in bold black ink, "Note, this project is launched by someone once called invisible." I paused, then smiled. I no longer needed to reclaim dignity. I live in it. Every minute, every hour, every 2 a.m. Feeding with Lucas. Every time I straighten my lab coat before walking into the lab. Every time I approve a project without needing anyone's blessing. I had started from zero, and now, by my own hands, I've built something no one can ever take away: freedom, worth, and a future defined by me. From a woman abandoned by her family, stripped of her work, and dismissed for being pregnant without a safety net, Nicole rebuilt everything through knowledge, resilience, and love. Without needing validation from the past, she created a present that cannot be denied: a biotech company bearing her name, 2 healthy children, and a life of freedom no one can control. Her story proves one truth: real worth doesn't need to be accepted, it only needs to be lived, fully and unapologetically. What do you think of Nicole's journey? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt, inspiring family stories.